Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you very much for coming to today's community working group session, the importance of data quality in humanitarian mapping. We have a great lineup of speakers today, and we're very excited to get this conversation going. Thank you all for coming. About the community working group, it is a group of mappers and community members dedicated to the support and engagement of community groups and contributors, aiming to leverage OpenStreetMap data and tools for positive social, humanitarian, and development impact. You can learn more about the community working group by going to the bit.ly link that you see on your screen there. We have our meetings every Tuesday, and we have the meetings in 2 different time zones, alternating weeks, so that people are able to join from all over the world, regardless of the time zone that they're in. If you're someone who is interested in how communities are able to contribute to and use OpenStreetMap data, we highly recommend you come check us out. Some reminders and house rules before we get started. This webinar is being live streamed and recorded on YouTube, as well as on Zoom. So anything, just so you're aware, anything you say or do during this webinar can be recorded and will be present on the internet indefinitely. Please do abide by the hot code of conduct while you are engaging in the session. You can see it in detail at the URL provided, but the essentials are: be welcoming, be respectful, be careful in your word, phrasing, and tone, and when we disagree, try to understand why. And how the session will be working today. We are going to have first an hour-long panel discussion. You are free to ask questions via chat, but you will not be able to unmute yourselves during the panel discussion. Feel free to ask your questions at any time, though we will also have a dedicated Q&A time starting at about the 40-minute mark. And then at the end of the hour, we will go into breakout rooms, which will be this time determined by theme, which will decide as the conversation goes on. We'll see what themes come out in the conversation, and we will we'll arrange the breakout rooms that way. And audience members will be able to choose the breakout rooms that they want to go into. And we'll explain how to use them at that time. And during the breakout rooms, everyone is able to talk using voice. If you would like to share about the session on social media, these are 2 hashtags that you can use: hashtag #ValidationMay and hashtag data quality. And now to get the conversation underway, I'd like to introduce Tommy Charles. He is a geographer from Sierra Leone and a Youth Mappers Regional Ambassador for Sierra Leone and Liberia. And while doing all that, he is also the coordinator of OSM Sierra Leone. So a very busy guy, someone who's contributed a lot to this community. And we're really excited to have him leading the conversation today. Tommy, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. As Benjamin has introduced, I am Tommy Charles, the OSM country coordinator and also a regional youth mapper ambassador. I'm very excited to be here. I'm honored to be here, to be part of this webinar, and I'm quite sure that we are all going to learn and also share knowledge within the community as it relates to data quality and humanitarian mapping. Our panelist for today, I'll start, I call your name and then you introduce yourself, and then we move on. And after introducing yourself, you tell us what does data quality means to you relating to the work that you're doing. So I'll start with Simon Wild.
Hi everybody, I'm a volunteer mapper and validator with Crowd2Map Tanzania, which is a remote mapping effort. I've been mapping with them for about 4.5 years. I also work on some of the training material that we have for beginner mappers and help to coach new mappers and bring them into producing good data that can be used on the ground.
Okay, thank you. Can you please tell us, like, what does data quality in humanitarian mapping means to you, like the work you're doing in Crowd2Map?
The importance really is the ability to navigate. Crowd2Map came to be because project workers from the Tanzania Development Trust couldn't find their way around rural Tanzania to go and do outreach work in communities. The whole basis of Crowd2Map is to help reduce and eliminate FGM in Tanzania, in rural Tanzania. And the people who wanted to get out and communicate with the rural communities in Tanzania couldn't find their way around. They were constantly getting lost. Obviously, there's no Google Maps out there. So that's how Crowd2Map was born. So we need to produce good road networks and population centres so people can get around and facilitate, the work, aid workers and community workers to promote not just the reduction in FGM, but also the other UN sustainability goals.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon, for that introduction. We move on to Shamila. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us what does data quality in humanitarian mapping means to you as it relates to the work that you're doing?
Thank you, Tommy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shamila Nasezi, and I work with Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team in Uganda. I'm also a member of the OpenStreetMap community here. And so for the past few years, I've been a contributor and also, a contributor to OpenStreetMap, and also I work with HOT as a GIS training associate. And I also usually support the team in data collection and validation. So we usually collect data for different projects, and this is data that's going to be used by other humanitarian organizations, by the local community here. So to me, data quality essentially means that the data that you're collecting can actually be used by people for whatever purpose that they need. So if it means if you're collecting maybe like points of interest in the field, you need to make sure maybe like you're collecting the accurate names. These places are actually accurately mapped, and you have the right information that people can actually use. And when it also comes to remote mapping, because sometimes even before you go to the field, you have to do some remote mapping, maybe to get like map out roads, map out buildings. Even these need to be accurately mapped. So we find that if one wrong building or a wrongly mapped road could mislead the field teams. So yes, to me, data quality means that we are putting high quality data into OSM, and by high quality, data can actually be used by people without misleading. And everyone, like if I'm going to make a map at the end of the day, I shouldn't have maybe like buildings in the legs, that are actually not there, or wrong points of interest. Yeah, just to sum it up.
Okay. Thank you very much, Shamila, for that introduction and powerful definition of data quality for humanitarian mapping. So we move on to Faye. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us what does data quality in humanitarian mapping means to you as it relates to your work?
Hi everyone, and good afternoon or good morning or good evening in your side. And I'm Faye Andal, and I'm currently affiliated with Youth Mappers as a regional ambassador, and I'm also a local contributor to OpenStreetMap Philippines, and I'm working also as a researcher at the UP Resilience Institute. And I've been working since 2013 in contributing to OpenStreetMap and to supporting the local governments here in the Philippines for their disaster risk reduction and management planning. And I think data quality is very essential for us in the humanitarian side or group, because these information are very crucial in responding and in supporting the local government actions and their contingency planning in their government. And I think data quality really has no absolute terms, cannot be measured in absolute terms, and because it really depends on the projects that we are working on. And so I believe that in maintaining a high quality data, we should set specific rules for us to meet all those requirements in order to achieve what we want or what we need for the specific project that we're working on. So that's all. Thank you. And I'm hoping.
Faye, you're on mute. We didn't get your last sentence.
Hello? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you, and I hope everyone's have a good day today in this webinar.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction and your brief insight about data quality in humanitarian mapping. So we move on to Michael. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us what does data quality in humanitarian mapping means to you as it relates to the work that you're doing?
Yes, welcome everyone. I'm working as a volunteer for the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, and I've been the chair of the training working group for quite a few years now. And as we are the people behind the Learn OSM website and the people who produce webinars on basic and advanced ID and JOSM, we are the people who try to make mappers and validators aware what tools are available in order to maintain and ensure data quality and how to get mapping and validating right.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. That was nice and sweet. We hope to learn more from all of you as the discussion continues. Unfortunately, Dr. Gaston is yet to be here. He's having some connection issues, but I hope he joins in as we get along. So I'll move on to our first question for today, and that it relates to data creation. This question is going directly to Simon Wild, but any other one of the panelists that want to touch on it, let us please know. The question goes like this. Whenever you see the need to create data for humanitarian purposes, what are normally the tools that come to mind that you are sure can be efficient? Hello, Simon.
I guess the tools that we use are, we basically work on the HOT platform, and we have a couple of guys who are GIS professionals who do our project setup. So really we're looking at where the need is. Those guys will go and look for project areas, and we'll proceed as, with a standard kind of HOT approach, really. Yeah, I mean that's probably all I can comment on that, I think.
Okay, Shamila, can you please weigh in on this? So when you see the need to create data for humanitarian purpose, what are the tools that normally comes in mind? Do you think that are efficient to use, that can give you maximum result?
Yes, thank you, Tommy. So I actually think this usually depends on the type of data that you're going to collect. So if you're going out to the field to pick points of interest, we have a variety of open source tools available. The team here in Uganda usually uses Open Data Kit. And so we also got into employing other tools like maps.me or maps.me or Street Complete. This is to engage like our community members. And if you're, of course, now for the mapping, I know most people on my team like to use JOSM, but you also have ID for remote mapping. Yeah, I think those are some of the can mention.
Okay, thank you very much. Faye, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yeah, sure. I think I agree with what Shamila said, that it actually depends on the objectives of the project. So if, for example, you need a complete information about the critical facilities in your area, so you need it to be complete, and so you need to collect your data using different tools like ODK, because you can set the forms that you can use to collect those information. And then in terms of the quality of the data that you'll be producing, we actually have a lot of tools available, open source tools, but it really depends on what side of data quality you want to solve, because different tools have different ways of solving or detecting an issue, right? So we have the JOSM validation tool that allows us to see the geometric errors for this data, but we also have an Osmos to detect a different type of issue also. So there are lots of tools available, and it depends on what you actually need to solve.
Okay, thank you very much, Faye. That sounds wonderful. Michael, can you please weigh in on this as it relates to Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team?
Well, when you are doing remote mapping, then, well, as everyone here already mentioned, ID and JOSM are the tools of choice, and particularly JOSM is well suited for validation. First of all, as Faye just mentioned, it has its built-in validation facilities, but it also allows you to download a really nearly arbitrary amount of data, which is good if you want to evaluate waterway or highway networks, where you need a bit more of a context than you can see in just ID.
Okay, thank you very much for that insight. I'm presuming that has been well touched on, and our audience quite understand what we're saying. So we'll move on to the next question. So let's say after you've determined the tools that will be used, what do you do to ensure that the human resource with the right skill and knowledge to participate in the project is available? Like, what do you do to make sure, to ensure that there is the human resource with the right skill and knowledge to participate in the project? We can start with Simon.
I guess as we're entirely volunteer based, we have to rely on what's available to us at the time. We have 2 or 3 high level guys who are GIS professionals. Then we have maybe a tier down, we have 3 or 4 people who are long-term validators in the project. And they also provide a lot of beginner map of feedback. We have our own Slack channel rather than just a hot Slack channel. So we have a very high percentage of beginner mappers. And as such, to try and make sure that we're getting reasonable data quality, we try and train those people and coach them and offer them support through their early stages, so we can raise their level of competency quite quickly. And they're probably the main tools that we use.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. And Shamila, can you please weigh in on this? So what are actually the things that you do to ensure that you have competent and skilled mappers to embark on your projects after selecting the tools?
Yes, thank you, Tommy. Yes, like Simon mentioned, training. You have to make sure you've trained your data collectors, that's for the field, or even your mappers, like that are going to participate in your project. Maybe one thing I would like to add, like for people interested in like field data collection, sometimes you have to make sure that, of course, you set out like a data model, and you know that maybe these are the features that you want to map, and this is the information that you want to gather about these features. So sometimes when you're creating maybe your data collection form, I've also noticed that limiting the data collectors like entries, let's say like typing questions or free text questions, will go a long way in improving your data quality. So if you set out like your tags, and you know that this is for this, we want maybe to get the names, or want to find, like giving people like choices for like open data kit, that helps a lot. Then for remote mapping, of course, there's going to be training, and thankful to Michael. Michael is here, he's going to share about the training working group and other different training that they've been running. So we usually always advise our mappers as well to attend these trainings, and on top of the training that we provide as well. Yeah, so lots of training.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shamila, for that. Over to you, Faye. So normally, what do you do to ensure that you have the right mappers with the right skills for a specific project?
Yeah, I think I have the same answers with Shamila and also Simon, that it's very important to train your people on how to use these tools, because we want to ensure that the objectives of the projects or the required quality of data that we need is clear to everyone. And so we need to build those skills through providing mentorships, trainings, and also it's important to have a feedback mechanisms during this training, so that we can ensure that our mappers are doing quite well for our requirements in building this data quality. Yeah.
Okay, mentioning that you need to have feedback mechanism. So,
Yeah.
ma'am, Faye, we start with you again on the next question.
Okay.
So let's say you've determined the tool that's going to be used, and you've assessed the skills of participants, of potential participants. So, do you normally have guidelines that they use to ensure that they produce high quality data that can be fit for purpose?
Yes, actually, before starting a training for the people, we need to have a clear guidelines on what we need for the project. For example, we need a very complete set of data, like for example, we're collecting critical facilities from the ground, so we have to train them on how to collect complete data sets, and then how to upload them to OpenStreetMap. So we also have guidelines on how to ensure that the data is consistent, is also accurate, so that the end users can make use of this data very well. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Faye, on that. So I will move on to Simon. So normally, do you have like guidelines that you present to mappers to ensure that they collect high quality data?
Yeah, well, most of our projects are just basic roads and buildings. We don't really vary much from that basic format. And what we do when people sign up, we have our own buildings and highways training on a separate platform. So we encourage people to go and do this training, and we also step them in by directing them initially to a project that will be set up for beginners that is buildings only. So they can cut their teeth just mapping buildings and get those skills down really well until they move on to trying to figure out highway tags and defining different highway tags. And then we offer them, or very strongly encourage them, to seek feedback on our Slack channel, where we will correct them and coach them and encourage them. And it's a process of continual engagement right from the get-go. It's engagement and good materials and making that consistent contact with people. And that seems to make a big difference in drawing people in and raising competencies quite quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we move on to Michael, there's been a question from one emergency question for Simon. So Simon, how much of the Crowd to Map new mapper support is one-on-one, and how much is group or online training? Like, what are the pros and cons to those two, like one-on-one or group and online training? How much have you been engaged in?
A lot of it is one-on-one by Slack. People will post the project number and task number within that project, and volunteers will then go and chase up that work and offer direct feedback on that. So we initially, like I said, we encourage people to go and do the training modules that we've written, And after that, it's a process of one-on-one feedback on Slack generally. Sometimes as people progress a little bit, you might move to giving feedback via Task Manager rather than Slack. It's a little bit quicker, you're only dealing with one platform. But the vast majority of common error feedback and resolution is done via Slack.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon, for that. So over to you, Michael. Let's say from the HOT perspective, after you've determined the tool and then you've determined the participants that will be taking part in the project, like you've assessed their skills. What are the normal guidelines that you use to ensure that they produce high quality data that can be fit for purpose?
Well, I think there is one point which is often underestimated, because I think a lot of the mapping which goes on through the hot tasking manager will be crowd mapping. So people shout out on social media that there are some projects and that you can help completing the world's map. So people then join the tasking manager and they get a link and find the project where they can map. And more or less the only kind of training, if you like, these mappers will receive are the project instructions. So because people are not requested to take some courses before that. Well, they're not requested to listen to one of those webinars which we organize. So we really have to make sure that the project instructions clearly lay out what people should do, what they should not do, what kind of imagery they should use. Because if they are not clear, and that's often the point, then we will not achieve a good quality, because very few of the new mappers actively seek feedback. I mean, we do have mapper support channels in Slack, we do have a mapper support mailing list, but the number of mappers who actively seek feedbacks, tell us, oh, hey, I'm a new mapper, could you please have a look at my mapping, whether I did everything properly? That's a one-digit figure per year. So the vast majority just go mapping, think, well, they did it all right. Of course, no one wants to make errors, so I'm sure they are convinced that they did everything right. So we really have to make sure in the project instructions what is good mapping, and if they are in doubt, where can they turn to in order to get some feedback.
Thank you very much. Michael. I think that was a brilliant point. So in other words, you're saying you're encouraging mappers to share the feedbacks on taxing and the taxing manager to ensure the efficiency of the data that they produce. They sometimes cannot get it all right, but there should be always the room for them to give feedback or like ask for help or directions as it relates to projects in the taxing manager. Okay, thank you very much, team, for that. So we'll move on to our next question. So this will start again with you, Michael. So we say, during the course of projects, or let's say one-off events, let's say a mapathon, and during those projects, you give mappers new skills, and especially the new mappers. And for existing ones, we go to the extent of improving on the skills that they have, So we need individuals like that within our communities that have the required skills. So what has been your strategy to retain them for future purposes, for future projects? The retention rate of experienced mappers that can produce quality data. What has been the strategy to retain them for future projects as it relates to HOT?
Well, that should be, I think, a large part of the responsibility of the project creators. They should always have a look at their project, how the progress is going, and if there are any mappers who really produce outstanding quality. I mean, if I look back, I've been mapping for HOT for nearly 10 years now. And of course, at the beginning, you make errors and then you start to correct them. And after some time, one of the project creators of those projects I was working on directly approached me and told me, well, I think your mapping is quite good. Don't you want to help me increase the quality and start validating things like that? So there is no central instance here in HOT which can observe the quality of each and every mapper. So I think it is definitely a responsibility of the project administrators to have a look. Are there any mappers who seem to be particularly well skilled and who could be good validators, and yes, asking them and promoting them in this way.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Michael. So stemming from the response of Michael, like he has stated that like project managers are actually the ones to help in terms of retaining quality mappers. And I'll move on to Shamila, who has been spearheading, quite sure spearheading some projects in Uganda. So after training the mappers, giving them high-tech skills, to embark on projects. So what are your strategies to retain them within your community so they can be part of future projects?
Thank you, Toby. I think retaining, whereas what we have been trying to do here is always actively involving people. Then maybe just from experience, just to add to what Michael mentioned earlier, I think getting feedback from the project managers is really great, because even when I was still a beginner mapper, I used to feel so happy, like receiving messages maybe from validators or the project managers, because this helps you. In that sense, then it made me see that there's actually someone else looking at my work. Like, I'm not doing this just like, there's actually people, there's a community here involved in this whole project. So I think building the community through that, like interaction with mappers, so that someone doesn't think they're not part of the community in that sense. I don't know if that actually helps. Then I think community-wise, like always actively involving people. Maybe don't just set up one project like once every like 6 months or so, like actually having like multiple, because there's lots of data to map. It may not just be buildings and roads. Like we have so many things to add to the map, like urging people to map their local communities, which is what Map Uganda is doing at the moment. And we've had great feedback from and participation from the community. Yeah, I think these are some of the things that can retain. And in most cases, you actually see that your active mappers or your active contributors will show themselves, and they'll be there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shamila, for that. So we move on to Faye. So what has been your strategy to retain highly trained mappers so they can keep contributing, adding quality data to your work?
Yeah, I've also had an experience on that since I worked also with HOT last year. And I think one of the most effective way to retain mappers or even validators is to give them appreciation of their work. It's really effective because we're showing them that their efforts are seen and very important, especially since we have public data available to everyone, and so everyone is gonna see their work, their hard work, and all that. And it's also effective to provide feedback about their work so that they know if they're doing very well in terms of creating data quality for OpenStreetMap. So I think those two things are needed in this community. Like, our validators also need validation from us project managers. So I think that would be it.
Okay, thank you very much, Faye. I think that was very insightful and innovative. Yeah. So we move on to Simon. So Simon, what has been your strategy to retain high quality mappers within the Crowd2Map community?
Really, I just build on everything that everybody else has said. It's about engagement and finding ways to engage with the people who've come to you for whatever reason. Obviously, Crowd2Map is a one subject long-term mapping effort. So we can build a community over a period of time. I think it's difficult for other HOT projects to build communities because they're in a rush to get something done. It's urgent. There's been some sort of disaster or catastrophe that needs to be addressed. We have the advantage of being a long-term project who can attract people. We're always looking for new ways to engage, but we do everything pretty much that everybody else has said. We go looking for people who are good mappers. We encourage people to build their skills and move to JOSM, and we point people to the hot resources, the recorded webinars, Learn OSM, all the other resources outside of our own. And we keep trying to build people's skills and their confidence and draw them into the community. Another thing we do is on our Slack channel, we produce like a weekly report card. So in that we will set targets for that week. So we'll have a project that we have a mapping target where we're trying to get a certain percentage mapped by the end of the week. Also, we'll have a validating target, and each week we'll update on those targets. We will give a quick summary of the stats for the last week. So maybe we've mapped 15,000 buildings and 500 kilometers of road, and basically keep thanking people. And we will pick out maybe the 20 top contributors in mapping and give them a shout out, and the same for validators. And it's just continually finding ways to engage people. And I think, as Faye said, recognizing people have contributed, and not just look at your project and think, great, that's mapped, we can move on. You need to keep building that confidence in people and engaging them and bringing them back. And I think, that it's essentially each project will find its own way to do that with different tools. I think that's demonstrated in what everybody else has said.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it sums up everything everyone has said, and that's very good. I'm quite sure our audience are learning as we're boxing on. Like, I think the highlight for now so far, like, we need to start validating the validators. There should be a mechanism in place for project managers to validate the validators. That is very wonderful. So we move on. So in as much as we are within the OpenStreetMap community, the open data community, we are all data creators, and one way or the other, we are also data users. So I'm starting this question, like, do you have, like, within the work that you're doing, do you have a threshold or thresholds to determine whether or not certain data sets are of high quality and reliable to use? Like, what are your thresholds? So we'll start with Faye. What are your thresholds to determine whether this particular data is fit for purpose?
In my past work, I think, of course, we're setting a certain threshold, right, for the to achieve that data quality. So it's based on different factors, such as completeness first, and then we also have accuracy and then consistency. As long as the data are complete, accurate, and consistent, and then I think we can say that the data is of high quality. And we also have to make sure that we compare the before and after data that we have, so that it's a good comparison if we were able to achieve the data quality that we need for the project. So I think, yeah, we have different tools available to measure data quality. We have different tools like JOSM validation, use Python scripting to allow us to detect if we're able to complete the data that we need. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Faye. So Shamila, can you please give us weigh in on this? What are your thresholds to determine whether or not a particular data set is fit for purpose?
I think actually what Faye mentioned is accurate. Like, those are some of the things you need to look at: accuracy, completeness, and like the coverage that you have made. Maybe one example I can actually give on tools. One of our recent projects where we were mapping for community flood resilience in Nakamiro, we used Map Campaigner. Before, we would like maybe take your data back, download your data by the export tool, and then like do extra work in QGIS, maybe to like check that you have everything. But we decided to use Map Campaigner, this allowed us to see, okay, if you've been mapping, so first of all, you need to make sure that we had mapped out all the buildings and the roads in this area. So there we had to do a comparison of what we had before and what we now have. Also looking maybe like at the counts, like the number of contributors that have come in. So there was that. Then, because we then had mappers going out to the fields to collect different attributes about the certain buildings and the different drainages in this area. So we used Map Campaigner in this case to check that, okay, if we wanted every building to have a name, the status, whether it's in a good condition or poor condition. So Map Campaigner basically allowed us to see that, okay, every building in this area has all the different attributes that you actually wanted in your data model. And it was perfect for quality assurance in this case and making sure that we actually had everything we needed for that area. So yeah, highly recommend for everyone else.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shamila. We move on to Simon. So as it relates to Cryptomap, what are your thresholds to determine whether or not data is fit for purpose? You're on mute, Simon. Simon, you're on mute.
Excuse me, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I guess as much as I can comment is on a functional kind of validator day-to-day basis. If you like, I think the hot guys call it a third pass before the project is finally archived, is done by other people, and I'm not personally involved in that. But on a day-to-day basis, we're really looking for your standard accuracies in validation that you would be looking for in any experienced validator, but also connectivity and roads, because that's one of the fundamentals of what we're trying to do, is to make sure that roads make sense, so they can be used for route finding, so people can get around. But as far as higher level data thresholds and acceptability, there would be people other than me that look at that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon, for that. So we move on to Michael. So Michael, as Simon mentioned about the third pass, something that the term that you, or phrase that you use in HOT. So can you please give us some information about this as it relates to the threshold in determining quality data that is fit for use?
Well, the training working group certainly isn't a data user, so I don't have much personal experience in that field. But I think that these metrics will change from project to project, because if you're looking to collect points of interest, such as water points or health centers, then I think accuracy is the key point, that they are in the right position and close to the building where they are located. But if you want to collect a road network in order to make sure that you can access all the villages in a certain area, then connectivity will be the key point, so that a routing algorithm will tell you how you can get to a specific village, and that all the intersections between roads and waterways are properly marked, whether they are bridges or fords, because if you're in a tropical country with a rainy season, this can mean that a ford might not be passable during the rainy season. So I think what you really have to look out in order to get the quality right will certainly depend on the kind of data which you collect.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Do you actually have a phrase like the third pass in the HOT?
Well, it's not directly built into the tasking manager, but I know that several project managers make sure that once it is completely validated in the first pass, they will have a few people go over it, because a road network is something which you cannot assess by looking at a single task. That is where JOSM's ability to load a larger area into its memory comes into play, because you have to really make sure that a road has a consistent tagging, whether it's a primary, secondary, or other road, over its whole stretch, over maybe 30 or 40 kilometers, and not just across those 1 or 2 kilometers you can see in one task. So network issues is one of the things you better evaluate and assess once the mapping and the first pass validation has been done, because otherwise the data change too often.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael, for that. So we'll move on to the next, and with that, I'll start with Faye again. So Faye, do you have standard procedures to revert back to data creators? Let's say your either remote mappers or field mappers. So do you have a standard procedure to revert back to them when there are irregularities with acquired data?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Okay, so after you've selected your tools, trained mappers, you've given them the guidelines to go out in the field or to do remote mapping. So do you actually have a standard procedure or mechanism to revert back to them when there are irregularities with the data, or you're sensing there are some inconsistency or incompleteness with the data? Do you have a standard mechanism to revert back to them?
Yeah, for us, for the work that we did in Hot Philippines last year. So first is for the remote mapping side. So since we have the tasking manager for that, for us to check if all the areas are validated, we usually do a second pass or second run of validation in the whole area just to make sure if the whole area is validated properly, or if we missed any errors or warnings that we detected from tools like JOSM. And then on the other hand, for their field mapping, after the field mappers have uploaded their data to OpenStreetMap, they also do the validation for that. So we have different tools to be able to know if the data are complete. We use a tool that was built using Python for that, and we also use different tools like JOSM validation tool to be able to know if the data are consistent, if the data are also aligned with the existing data that is already on OpenStreetMap. So actually, we have different tools that we use to ensure that the quality of data is being met for these kinds of mapping, for remote mapping and also for field mapping. Yeah, because it's very important to have a structured flow to ensure that you will be meeting all the requirements that you need for your project.
Okay, thank you very much, Faye. Thank you very much for that response. So we move on to Shamila. So what are normally your procedures to revert back to mappers when you observe that there are some inconsistency or accuracy issues with the data that they produce?
Yes, Tommy. So just at what Faye said, we usually have. So I think this still goes back to how do you stay in touch with your mappers and how do you provide feedback? So in most cases, when you have like a campaign or so let's say for remote mapping, you would have always look out for maybe like people's comments in the tasking manager, like mappers' comments in the tasking manager, because there's that ask the project managers part in the tasking manager to maybe if someone hasn't understood something, or if you're validating, like the task manager gives you an option of reaching out to mappers directly, like through the messages. Then we also have, sometimes if you have like a local, say like a mapathon or like a mapping campaign locally, we usually have a WhatsApp group where you can interact with all the different members of the community. So we use tools sometimes like OSM chat to directly see someone's trend set and advise them. Sometimes if you notice maybe like there's a continuous like quality coming up from someone, or maybe like from your group generally, you can just generalize and say, okay, guys, we have this coming in. Can we have this rectified? Is anyone having a problem with this? So reaching out to mappers that way, yeah, I think that this is basically how we revert and provide feedback.
Okay, so Simon, thank you very much for that, Shamila. Simon, can you weigh in on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very similar method, really, to what Shamila's described. It's using the OSM tool, communication tools, and the Slack channel and tasking manager, and just following up with people, because we are entirely remote mappers, and having extolled the virtues of being a long-term project previously, that one of our other problems with being a long-term project is that projects can go stale, and it can take an enormous amount of time to get back to people. We are currently mapping, our validation target at the moment is a project that's 18 months old. And you find if you want to give feedback to someone, it's worth going to check to see if there's still an active mapper, otherwise you're just wasting your time. So that's one of the downsides of a long-term project, is if you're not consistently keeping up with your validation, then you're going to fall by the wayside with communicating with people and giving them feedback. But yeah, other than that, it's the standard it's the standard methods, and it's rare that we really have to chase people down because they're not listening, or for some reason they've decided that they're going to do their own thing. So usually with a combination of different approaches, or even different people approaching the same person, then you usually get through and make some headway with that person and improve their work.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon, for that. So there is a poll on our screen. We'd like to determine what's the most important aspect of data quality as it relates to your work: data completeness, data accuracy, data consistency. So the poll will be up, let's say, for the next 60 seconds. We'll advise everybody to take part so we can determine what's the most important aspect of data quality. So we move on. This question actually is coming from the audience. It says, it says, humanitarian mapping is often criticized by others in the OpenStreetMap community for creating poor quality data. So is that true? And if so, what is the main gap? What are the main gaps or issues? So I'll start with Michael. So you have training, you're part of the HOT training group. So what's your take about this, to say that humanitarian mapping is creating poor quality data? So what can you say about that? And if it's true, what do you think might be the gaps or issues?
Well, if I look a little bit back in time, when I started mapping for HOT, I think the main problem was that there was always a real lack of validation. A couple of years ago, you could be really happy if a project had a 10% validation rate, and this has changed dramatically over the past 2 years. And I think certainly a great deal of that is thanks to the activities of Ralph A. Toon, who always emphasized the importance of validation and made sure that the tools will support that here. And but nowadays we can see that many projects are validated within a very short period of time. So I think that's the key to success in order to increase the quality, because you cannot expect a new mapper to be perfect. So and just as Simon mentioned, it is important to catch them as early as possible so that they will avoid making those errors again in the near future. So really trying to get validation, first pass validation, really in sync with mapping is key to enhancing data quality. And we tell all validators, please give feedback to mappers, because once we were all beginners, and if new mappers are not told what they do wrong, they will never have a chance to improve. And if you do that in a polite manner, my experience, that I often get a really great feedback from them. So thanks for helping, and can you point me to a few further resources? So communication is the key, I think, to increase the data quality.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael, for that. I think we started off late, so for time exigency. So I'll move on to what I'll consider to be our last question for now. And so stemming from the last question, there's been criticism about data that is produced for humanitarian purposes or humanitarian mapping. So that means we have, apart from humanitarian mapping, there are also other people that are creating data, that are using data for corporate purposes, either for business, education, research, and all. So my question to all of you is, how best do you think the creation and validation of data for both humanitarian and non-humanitarian purpose can be standardized and integrated for the goal of producing quality data? Like, how can we integrate the data needs? How can we integrate the validation of data? How can we integrate the creation of data that can suit the purposes of both humanitarian and non-humanitarian purposes? We start with you, Faye.
Thank you. I think it's quite difficult to meet both sides, because in OpenStreetMap, and we have different use cases for our OpenStreetMap data, and each project has different requirements to meet their project objectives, right? But I think it would be helpful to just create a set of data quality rules based on the project requirements, for example, for humanitarian mapping, and also for other use cases like for businesses and so on. That can be a good starting point in ensuring the data quality that we have. And I think it's also important to always involve the local communities in this in the creation of creating high quality of data, because we all know that local communities have a lot to contribute in terms of giving out the local knowledge that we need for us to validate the data more. So I think because in humanitarian mapping, and for example in business, we really have different needs that we need to solve, right? So of course for humanitarian mapping, we need to look at the completeness of the data, if the data is of up to date. So we have to really be conscious of that. But businesses do have different approach, or do have different needs on their end as well. So we just have to create a rule for us to be able to achieve the data quality that we need. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Faye, for that. So we'll move on to you, Shamila. So Shamila, like Faye have just mentioned, we have people who use, like, these are open source data, like let's say the OpenStreetMap platform. Both we have, these are open source data that are created by volunteers and all, and sometimes some companies come on board. So do you think that we can establish a meeting point to determine the quality of data that is being added to these platforms, and how they can be validated to suit the comfort of both parties that, I mean, humanitarians and humanitarians and non-humanitarian purpose? Like, we can develop a common ground, like this is the standard, whether it's for humanitarian or not, this is going to be the standard of adding data or validating data within the platform, so we can have consistency in the data that is being added to the platforms.
Thank you, Toby. But like Faye mentioned, I think this is a complex one, or not complex per se, but like to actually come to a common ground to say, okay, this is how we should validate our data, because people usually add different types of data to OpenStreetMap. So I think, me personally, the best I would say is making sure that we are improving the map. So because sometimes even like when you're validating, let's say you're mapping a building, and then you find that the road nearby is wrongly mapped. Like, do you leave it, or you don't know who mapped it, but you're going to improve it because you're improving the map in this case. So I think all contributors should just have the back of, we are building this map, involving local people at the end of the day to like add extra information in this case. So I think at the end of the day, it has to just be you're adding quality data to the map. So we already discussed like different tools we can use to validate our data, check that it's complete, accurate, you know. So everyone that is actually contributing to the map should ensure that they're adding quality information and doing it for the best of other people. Like, I'm not going to map like places that do not exist or add wrong information, or say like I go and map and add private information to the map. Like, it still just goes back to the contributors to, you know, we are building the map for everyone else. It's a community map. So the standards of, yeah, just everyone should just be doing their best, really. I don't think there is like a standardized thing.
Okay, thank you very much, Shamila, for that. So we move on to Simon. Is that any way you can weigh in on this, like a meeting point for humanitarian and non-humanitarian data creators and validators in order to ensure consistency?
I don't think I can really add anything that Shamila and Faye haven't said. With it, should we try to reach standards and rules and bring those communities together? Absolutely. How successful will we be? That is one of these things that will be, you know, not a constant battle, but an endless conversation. Maybe. I think. Will you ever reach one point that fixes that? Probably not. And you should also, as I think both Faye and Shamila said, that you know, you can't forget the people who live in the data and the communities that are actually using the data on the ground. It's all very good, corporations looking at this data, but you've still got to have the people on the ground in that mix as well. So will we get to a point? I don't know, but we should absolutely continue trying, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. So Michael, can you please weigh in on this? Is there any way you think we can ever have a meeting point for humanitarian and non-humanitarian data creators and validators within the OpenStreetMap community?
Well, I think avoiding conflicts here starts with a project creation. I mean, I recall a recent discussion on the OpenStreetMap Foundation's talk mailing list where people in the country, don't recall which one it was, were complaining that HOT was basically retagging the road network, and that boiled down to poor project instructions, which said how people should map and tag highways. And what they did is they looked at every highway they could see and retagged it according to what they understood from those project guidelines. And of course, that was not a very welcome activity. So getting in touch with a local community, trying to figure out if there are any specific guidelines for that particular country is key, so that we can best integrate with the local OSM community and make sure that humanitarian mapping fits into their way of handling things. So humanitarian mapping is a small fraction of the whole contributions to OpenStreetMap. So we have to fit in there and have to make sure that we don't disturb anything. That's the key point.
Okay. Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you very much to our audience for being good listeners and asking very salient questions. So at this point, I think that will be our last question for this discussion session. So I'll advise everyone to please switch on their video so we can have something like a group photo. Please, like the audience, everyone, just let's see how you can do this. Just switch on your videos, your cams, let them be on.
Just a moment, I'll take the picture.
Okay, Simon. Please go ahead, like everyone, please put on your cams.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Wait a second. Let me take a second one too. Some people with their eyes closed. Okay. 3, 2, 1, now. There we go. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Simon. So As Simon discussed, I mentioned earlier on, we have 3 breakout rooms. I think there are a lot of things that we can learn from each of the panelists. You know, they will be part of the breakout rooms, so you can get in touch with them one-on-one, so we can learn directly from them, you know, and most likely network with them to see how best we can further our knowledge about certain things they've answered already. So Simon, it has been a very good a very good educative discussion, and I hope we have discussions like this moving forward, so we can keep enlightening the community about data quality as it relates to humanitarian mapping. Thank you all to the panelists. Your responses to all the questions have been perfect, like they've been excellent. I'm quite sure that the audience has learned a lot from you. And so for the audience to get in touch, to learn further, I'll advise you all go to the breakout room so we can learn directly from the
My apologies to anyone who was cut off mid-sentence by that. But welcome back to the main room. Tommy, is there anything you would like to say to close us out? Tommy, you are muted right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. So I'll firstly like to say thanks to all our panelists. Like, you guys did a great job, and we are appreciative of what you did, the insights, the information, the education. You know, we are very glad. This is on behalf of myself and the audience. I'm starting that we are all going to leave this webinar learning something, or one or two, right? And as a Youth Mapper ambassador, I'd like to say there is the Youth Mappers Academy, where there's a lot of things we can learn there in terms of data creation, the use of data, learning about the OpenStreetMap community, humanitarian OpenStreetMap, everything that relates to OpenStreetMap. So I'll advise everyone to take advantage of that opportunity. You know, it's a very good educative platform to make use of it. And also there is the HOT data quality internship, which will also encourage our members within our communities to participate in such an initiative. I think it will boost the amount of people we have within our communities that can produce quality data. So once more, I say thanks to everyone, and I hope we'll be having sessions like this one so we can keep informing ourselves within the community. Thank you all.
Thank you all
you
for
so
coming today.
much.
Thanks so.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.